What's up, everyone, and welcome into the Buffalo Sports Collective. It is Monday, May 13th, 2024. As always, I am PK alongside my co-host Phil for episode 284. Happy Mother's Day to all of the mothers out there in one way, shape, or form. You are the reason that we are all here today, so thank you for doing all the dirty work and all the unspoken thank yous and driving us to sports practices and making sure our clothes are clean and making dinner and driving us all over the place and all the other thankless jobs that all the mothers out there do. It does not go unnoticed, and as you grow up, you appreciate it more and more. I don't know if you feel the same way, Phil, but as I grew up, I realized how much more extra work my mom did that I didn't really even either clue in on or appreciate back then.
Yeah, when you become an adult, it is
Yes, that's a good
much more difficult. And even now in my adulthood, you and I are kidless, and likely going to stay that way. But even us now, like whenever I see coworkers or just know of people that are moms for that have kids and also have, are going to school, also have a job, trying to do stuff on there. I don't know how anybody has the energy. I'm not going to say time because I know they are extremely busy and don't really have the time to do any of that, but they find a way to make it work. And just the energy and ability that moms and parents have is way beyond me. I can barely handle my own job coming home exhausted at the end of the day. So I know people who have said that once you have kids, it's one of those things where you just kind of do it, whether you're exhausted or not, you kind of fight through because you, in a way, have to. But still extremely impressive. And like you said, there's a lot that when you're growing up, you don't really fully appreciate and understand that your mom is doing for you until you have to do all of that stuff yourself on top of having a job, which I feel like most mothers do. And it's a lot. And like you said, pretty much a thankless job for the most part. I know I was not always the best child growing up, and I'm sure I gave my mom a hard time quite often about homework or life or whatever it was. And it's thankless and the unsung heroes of our lives.
So hope everyone had a happy Mother's Day in one way, shape, or form. And we're recording earlier, so I'll be going to see my mom later on after this episode is complete. So remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at Buffalo Sports Collective, and on X and Blue Sky at Buffalo Sports Co. Don't forget to follow our channel wherever you listen to podcasts. Check out our website at buffalosportscollective.com. Phil is off this week. I am on this week, so my article will be out on Thursday. Look for the time breakdown in the description of the show. We have strictly all lacrosse this episode. We're going to be talking about Toronto, Halifax, and the Seals. Another season of failed expectations being reached. So we'll be taking a look at their roster, what it looks like this offseason, what we think they might have to do. We'll be talking about what the Albany Buffalo matchup this season has looked like. And to wrap up the show, the top three things that Buffalo has to do to defend their title and win back-to-back championships. But we'll start with Halifax, Toronto, and the Seals. All had earlier than expected playoff exits. We all, both you and I, had them in our top four, I believe, from before the season even kicked off. I think we each had different orders, but we each had them in our top four, so we all thought they would have playoff home games, and all but Halifax did. And still, they all failed another season to reach the finals, and they all had teams that were built to, at least quote unquote, built to make the playoffs and make a deep run into the playoffs with championship aspirations. So let's look forward on what these teams actually look like, and just another season, probably 3 straight seasons of not making the finals. And after doing that, I think a lot of these teams might have to either look a new direction in the franchise up, like is trying to figure out, hey, are they going to bring back the head coach? Are they going to bring back the GM? Is it just the players that they're going to be switching out? But Phil, let's start with Halifax, and I guess we can go over what their team overall looks like. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players that have more than 1 year left on this on their deals. They got Cody Jameson's got 2 years left. Jake Withers got 2 years left. Hossack and Tarafanko each have, Hossack's got 2 years left. And then Tarafanko and Bo Hunter each have 3 years left. But you got guys like Ryan Benesh, Austin Shanks, Ryan Stotts, David Brock, all UFAs going into next year. So this team could look drastically different next year. And I don't think that would be a bad thing. I don't believe they're going to fire Micah Kersey, but I do think that this offense at least could look completely different after their 3-goal performance against Albany in the first round of the playoffs.
And even some of their better in-contract offensive players are even up there a little bit in age. Like Cody Jameson's one of the better ones on their team. He's 37. So a lot of their offense is getting on the wrong side of where you wanted to be. I mean, Benesh still had a mind-blowing, incredible season. So I think to me, he's the most interesting one of those UFAs. Being 39, it's kind of a will he come back at all situation. I mean, he could just hang it up. He could come back. And if he does come back, does he want to come back to a Halifax team that has been a first round exit 3 straight years in playoffs? Or does he want to try to come back to a team, anyone else, that might have been a little bit closer to advancing? And my goodness, do not go to Toronto Rock. But something like that, a team that's much closer and appears much closer. I mean, Halifax to me is not good. Their team has been scary-ish throughout the years, but I mean, pretty much mediocre. In the last 3 years, they've been 11-7, 10-8, 10-8. That's not screaming an incredible team. That's, I mean, a little over 500, so not great. And then 3 straight first-round exits in the playoffs. So to me, this team needs to be blown up. Like, out of the 3 teams we're going to discuss, this just isn't working. I mean, they have not improved their in-season record for the last 3 years, and they have not improved their playoff ability the last 3 years. So this team to me needs to look a lot different. And if that means, I mean, Benesh isn't the problem, but if that means letting a 39-year-old Benesh walk and trying to find some other replacement, then maybe that's the way they have to go. David Brock, to me, he's someone who could possibly hang it up as well, but I can't imagine them moving forward without Shanks and Stotts. I think it's a big part of their team. So I think they would try to get them back, but I don't know. This team, to me, one way or the other, is the farthest of the 3 we're going to discuss as far as truly making a championship push. I think they're just kind of in that mediocre middle area where you're making playoffs, but then doing absolutely nothing. I mean, 3 goals, like you mentioned this year, and your playoff exit is terrible.
Yeah, I could see Ryan Benesh. I know he came back again this year. All the talk was it was going to be his one last shot to make the finals and win another title, which is the only thing that's really missing in his unbelievable career. Is he doesn't have that title that he's been craving. I could honestly see him going to Albany, and that would be terrifying because they got the young guns with the righties, but he's a lefty, and he would fit pretty perfectly on that team. But
him and Williams on the left, yikes.
Yeah, it would be pretty filthy. But yeah, I agree with you. I think Halifax is the team that's furthest away and needs to make those changes. And I wrote in my articles all this year, Halifax is that team that can beat up on the weaker teams and can't beat the top teams. Like in 2022 and 23, first round exits from the Rock. And you're going in this year, okay? They're facing this Albany team. And I know Albany just swept San Diego, but forget that part. Think going into the playoffs, hey, Halifax doesn't have to face Toronto. They had their best shot in the last 3 years to get out of round 1 because they're not facing the Rock. And I still remember Challen Rogers is the one that went down the field and ended their one season, scoring on Warren Hill in overtime. But they put up 3 goals. It's unacceptable. This is a team that was built to try to get to the finals or at least try to get out of the first round, and they failed for the 3rd straight season. This is a team that a lot of players on this team are household names. Graham Hossack, Jake Withers, Cody Jamieson, Ryan Benesh, Randy Stotts, Austin Shanks. You got Colton Watkinson. You got Clark Peterson, who had a great season. Tyson Bell. These are household names. They're big name players, but they're just a team that can't beat the top level teams in the league. When that happens, you need to have a massive shakeup. And I don't believe Micah Kersey is going to be the one that gets the firing. I don't believe he's going to get fired because of the inabilities on this team. When you score 3 goals, that's not on the coaching. That's on the players on the field. And I understand Doug Jamieson had a really, really good playoff so far, and he pretty much shut down Halifax, and they were getting shots on net. He was just stonewalling them. But this is a veteran team that just struggled again and again and again against these top level talent. You need to have a massive shakeup, whether that means, Ryan Benesh doesn't come back, whether that means Austin Shanks doesn't come back, Stotts doesn't come back, whether that means you're trading a guy like Cody Jamieson, or you're trying to upgrade in net, which I don't think is the problem, which I thought Warren Hill had a very good year. But one, they're not young enough. They don't have a ton of young talent coming up. I mean, your youngest forward is like Clark Peterson, who's 27. They don't have like a Token Anacoke.
Yeah,
like
I think
the Buffalo
Hunter
does.
was the one they were kind of hoping would take
And
off.
he has yet
but
to step
yeah,
up, right?
He's young, but he hasn't done it yet. I mean, he was in 2 games this year. So, or sorry,
Right,
13,
yeah.
2 goals is what I meant to say. So he
he has not stepped up.
right.
Yeah, it's definitely a team that needs to look into blowing it up. And it's not just because of their age. I mean, if you're looking at it, Ryan Benesh is 39, David Brock is 38, and Cody Jamieson is 37. Everybody else is on the younger side. Graham Hossick and Warren Hill are the next oldest at 32. So it's not their age that's the main issue. It's the core that has yet to get it done. So I really think this is a team that if you run it back, and Halifax is one of those franchises that has a team that packs the barn week after week. This is a city that is hungry for a great Halifax Thunderbirds team. And if you bring back this same team that has failed you year after year, those fans are going to have an uproar, and you might see in Halifax, like I said, is one of those cities that has very smart fan bases. I don't think they're going to put up with a team that tries to run it back for a 4th straight year with the same players. I think this is a team that has to have a major shakeup, whether that's letting those 4 UFAs walk away or trading some of these guys that have longer term, like a Cody Jamieson or a Graham Hossick or a Bo Hunter or something, and change up what has not been working year after year.
Yeah, for their average attendance, I have it in front of me. In 2022, it was only 4,000, but 23 was 8,500, and this year was 9,100. So they've gone up. They doubled.
And I think
after
they only have right around an 11,000 seat arena too.
So after the COVID season, they took a dip, but a lot of the league did, so that's fine. But after
that was their first year in Halifax as well, if I remember correctly.
2020 was the canceled season was their first year.
Right. Yep.
Then, cut short season was their first year in Halifax. Then the canceled season, and then they had a 4,000, but then since 8,500 and 9,000. So, like you mentioned, not one of the teams really in the league that's hurting for home attendance, but you got to give them something. I mean, yes, they, made playoffs, which whoop-de-doo is exciting, but I think you and I agree that it's just not a team that is ready to really make that push. Like even this year, had they advanced in the first round, are they getting past Toronto or Buffalo? I don't think so.
Right. Yeah. So I think
San Diego.
we're both,
the playoffs shook out.
Yeah, they would have had San Diego.
Right.
Yeah, it would have been San
Diego.
Diego.
I don't think they're getting past San Diego either. So
yeah, agreed. Yeah, and that's a good transition because San Diego's the next team that we're going to be talking about here is another team that, hey, did you get past the first round this year? Yeah, great. Perfect. That's exactly what you were trying to do. But then you lost to Albany. You did not reach expectations. You had a Brody Merrill who came out of retirement because he saw, ooh, shiny new thing. I could probably win a championship on the backs of these players. And they failed again. And I still would have put an asterisk next to his championship if he came out of it. But this is a team that, besides Kyle Jackson, Patrick Shumay, and Chris Origoleri, nobody else has a multi-year deal left. And you got Westberg, who's a UFA. You got Dane Doby, who's a UFA. Chris Wardell, who's a UFA. Jesse Gamble, UFA. Brody Merrill, UFA. Mike Poulin, UFA. So they have a lot of veteran pieces. And going into the playoffs, this was the oldest team on paper. And you might not have a Dane Doby coming back. I think they'll probably redo Westberg, and I think he'll come back as the captain and a really good player. But, I mean, there's no long-term deals here. You can trade a lot of these players out. Curtis Dixon has come up short. Austin Stotts is played unbelievable, but he's a hothead, and he's going to be suspended, whether it's the 7 games that's being reported or, if he wins some type of appeal. But going into the season, I was one of those ones that went, this team has all the pieces to win a championship. The only question mark is in net is Chris Origoleri. And he is one of the only pieces that I think is actually it completely flipped on its head in this offseason here. Is you're looking at a team who, to me, the only thing they really have going for them is a goalie of the future in Irregulari who's 22, 4 years left on their deal. They're making everybody look silly after signing a 21-year-old to a 5-year deal before he really proved anything. And he is an absolute stud in net, up for goaltender of the year. And I really think this is a team that also needs to go through a big transition. They can't keep running it back. You made that huge offseason move to bring in a Trevor Baptiste, and it didn't work. And he struggled in the faceoff dot versus Joe Nardella, who, yes, is another good faceoff man, but you brought in a Trevor Baptiste to dominate that and get extra positions. And this is a team that's very up and down. They have a good game and then a bad game and a good game and a bad game. And for a veteran team like this to have the inconsistencies like that, it's very disappointing.
Yeah, I mean, the only other one I'll give it to, which you already did kind of mention, but Origlieri and then Berg are probably their two staples on this team.
But even Berg's a UFA. Is he going to want to come back to this?
Yeah, if they can bring him back. But right now, like you said, signed players, it's pretty much just Origlieri, and then even some of those guys they brought in to push them over the edge, like a Kyle Rubish, who I've been wanting on the Bandits for a long time. He's a player that's 36, Holding's 35. I mean, they have a lot of aging players with 1 or no years left. And even like you mentioned, Baptiste, I mean, he's an RFA, so we'll see what happens with him. But you brought him in to get that next push, and you weren't able to do it. This team, while, I mean, the two teams that we've talked about here, San Diego and Halifax, San Diego's existed since 2019, Halifax since 2020. So they are very young teams, and they're doing okay for young kind of expansion teams. But at the same time, I mean, yeah, they don't have the history that they've been around for a really long time, but San Diego has been pushing really, really hard for the last few years to get that championship, and they have not really come all that close. I mean, 2022, they went 2-2, lost in the West Finals. 23, they were out in the first round. And then this year, we all know they won their first one barely and then got swept by Albany. So even with this team that has finished 10-8, 14-4, 13-5, so pretty solid in the regular season, but they have not done nearly that well in playoffs. And I know the 2022 season where they lost in game 3 of the finals is the closest they've really come, which is pretty close, obviously, but to have a team that is supposed to be this veteran team ready to go, ready to make the championship and win it, they are not doing it, and they can't even get to the finals, let alone win one. So another team that I think is in contention for kind of blowing it up and getting rid of some of these aging players and kind of hitting a reset button, especially when you have such a good goalie that a reset isn't a massive reset. It could be just a, couple year, get a little bit younger, get some newer, young, flashy talent on this team and try to move on from some of the aging players and kind of reset it while you have this really up and coming, very young goalie that you can kind of backbone the team based on.
Yeah, and I mean, I like a lot of the pieces on this team. I liked Westberg. I like Dane Doby. I like Curtis Dixon. I like Stotts. I like Trey Leclerc. And they have a bunch of pieces that are older, but yes, they have a bunch of pieces that are younger. They got Bradley, who's 27. Baptiste is 28. O'Keefe, when he plays, is 26. You had Trey Leclerc, who's only 26. Austin Stotts is only 26. You got Danny Logan, who's 27. So they have a lot of younger pieces. But they also have a lot of the veteran pieces who, well, yes, a lot of them are UFAs and Doby and Wardell and Gamble and Merrill and Poulin. But this is a team that, again, has to go through a major change. And I don't think Pat Merrill is going to be the one that gets fired. And he's the coach and GM. I don't see him losing his job because of another failed season. But this is a team that definitely has to get younger. They have to get faster, and they have to fix a offense that has been lacking in consistency. When your team averages less than 10 goals allowed, and you finish 13-5, and you're a first or a second round exit, that's not good enough. Like, their goaltending and their defense was not the problem. It was their offense that just lacked consistency all year, and I think that is something similar to Halifax that they have to change up is the consistency on offense. Maybe Phil, you just take San Diego's forwards and you trade them to Halifax, and Halifax forwards come to San Diego, and maybe that's what they need to switch it up. I'm just joking, of course, but obviously this is another team that, was the number 2 seed going into the playoffs, was the number 2 or 1 seed the majority of the season, and they just came up short once again. And I think San Diego, yes, their attendance is not where I think they need to be,
which
but
is weird.
I think is a spot where out west, if you're not, even if you are Canadian, I think San Diego is a place that you would want to go play just because of the weather, just because of the facilities they have, the money that they put into this team. It's a team that desperately wants to win, and it's a team that's putting the money forward to win. They just haven't been able to get over the hump. But I think San Diego is a playoff destination and a destination for free agents. So I don't think it would be difficult to try to bring some free agents that will go over in the offseason to the Seals.
Yeah, especially after watching that behind the scenes of their
Right. Yep.
season and kind of seeing what they have going on. And it looked like a lot of fun. Like you mentioned, I think they had the outdoor game that year for the first time ever for the NLL, and that was really cool. And just everything they, like you said, they seem like they care. It's not a franchise that is necessarily not going for it and just kind of keeps running the same team out there, hoping for the best. They do give a lot of emotion and effort, and I mean, the emotion is sometimes directed incorrectly when they're out there, but that is a different story. But yeah, I think I don't know. I mean, they should get younger. They should try to shake up their offense, but the core of the team, like you mentioned, is still pretty solid, and they'll be good again next year, depending on what they do in free agency.
So before we dive into the Toronto Rock, let's get our first sponsor read right here. Tap That Tap Room. Phil, giving you a little bit more time to scroll down in the docket, but take it away with Tap That Tap Room.
It was a long scroll. Tap That Tap Room is at 363 Delaware Street in Tonawanda, New York. They are Buffalo's first women-owned self-pour bar. And how a self-pour bar works is you grab a card, you grab a drink for yourself, and you can try as much or as little of the 30 consistently rotating taps of beer, cider, sour, seltzers, and malt beverages.
So they have a lot of events that they also have, and a lot of them are, turnovers from the week prior. It's a lot of returners and a lot of things that are constantly there. You got trivia every Wednesday starting at 7:30. You got karaoke every Thursday starting at 7. And then you got the Bandits watch parties. And we're going to promote this one on this show and the next show to get as many people out there on that Friday away game as possible that aren't going to Albany. But if you don't have tickets on Saturday, which are going to be tougher and tougher to get as the season goes, or the week goes on, they not only show the Bandits, but they're one of the very few places that actually have the sound on, and it's loud enough where you can hear, but it's not too loud where you can't hear the person talking next to you. So I see a lot of people in the Bandits groups asking, hey, who is showing? Where are the watch parties? And we always tag Tap That Tap Room, because to us, that's the best environment to watch these games. Is you can watch the games along with a bunch of other Bandits fans, and it's a known place, so you're not getting a bunch of parties and a bunch of people that are just coming just to enjoy the environment. They're coming to watch the Buffalo Bandits, and that's why they can have the sound on. So it's one of the best environments you can go if you don't have tickets and you're not going to Albany. But check out their Facebook page for all their posted events, or check out their website at tapthattaproom.com for everything that's on tap and what is on deck. So let's dive into the Toronto Rock now, Phil. As we know, as people that cover the Buffalo Bandits, Toronto have not really fared well in the playoffs whatsoever when they're going against Buffalo. It has not gone their way whatsoever the last 3 years. But, there's a lot of UFAs on this team. There's one player with a multi-year deal left, and that's Challen Rogers, who's 30 with 3 years left. But everybody else is either, needs a new deal or has 1 year left. And going into this offseason, we were like, hey, if this is not the Toronto Rock season, when will it ever be? Because they have all the pieces. They had one player out all year in Latrell Harris. And that was pretty much it. And I know they were hurt a lot this season, but going into the playoffs, that was the healthiest they had been. And they had all the pieces. Nick Rose is now a UFA. Mark Matthews, who they traded for, is a UFA. Corey Small is a UFA. Dan Littner, who they traded for, is a UFA. Billy Hostrauser, UFA. Sheldon Burns, UFA. Then you got Schreiber's got 1 year left. Bushi's got 1 year left. Craig's got 1 year left. Mazuka, Craig Corbeil, Desnu, Cree, Slade, Jubenville, Erlin, all with 1 year left. So this is a team that if you can't bring back a Mark Matthews for whatever reason, if you can't bring back a Corey Small for whatever reason, if Nick Rose finally has enough of this and says, hey, I want to go sign somewhere else, which I doubt it, but this is a team that, to me, I think is going to run it back. But this is the first time I'm actually saying it. I think they're going to make a head coaching change. I think Matt Sawyer is going to be the one that takes the brunt of this, because you can't defeat the one team that you need to defeat to make the finals. You can change the unifying standings and make it a unifying standings all you want, but you still have to get by Buffalo, and they haven't been able to do it. And I can't put all the blame on Nick Rose. I can't put all the blame on the offense. The pieces are there. I honestly believe that the pieces are there, and you can call me a Toronto homer or whatever you want, but I truly believe this is a team that can do it, and their defense has shown it. And they just haven't been able to get over that hump of Buffalo. And to me, I think it's a play design, and I think it's a playoff scheme that they haven't been able to do it, because I really think if you make a head coaching change, you're giving your team, if you run it back again, a good opportunity to finally beat Buffalo. I think it really is a coaching scheme issue to me.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's going to be tough to make that firing. He's been a big part of this team for a long time, but it's similar to the Buffalo Bills at this point where, and I mean, we know McDermott's not going anywhere, but it's the idea that they've been successful. They've done well in the East. I mean, this year or the last 3 years, 13-5, 13-5, 15-3. They're doing an incredible job during the season. In the 22-23, they were only second to the Buffalo Bandits, who finished both those seasons 14-4. So it's not like they were even that far off. And this year, they had the best season that they've ever had in franchise history. So they're doing a really, really good job during the season. The team is a good team. But when it comes to, for the Bills playing Kansas City or Toronto playing the Bandits, they just cannot figure out a way to get past them. And like you said, a lot of that comes down to coaching. Realistically, looking at this team, the only other thing I could see is maybe they still need some kind of extra juice on offense. Their offense seems flat a little bit, but at the same time, they were extremely steady this year on offense. They were third in the entire league in goals for per game. So you really can't look at the offense and say that they had a bad season or that's the true reason they lost. But when it came to the playoff crunch, I mean, 4 goals. And I know Matt Vince and the Buffalo Bandits defense is playing really, really well. So I'm not trying to take any credit away from what they're doing, but 4 goals in a game is inexcusable. And then even the 8, while not terrible, it's not good, especially when you're averaging closer to 12 a game throughout the entire season. I know playoffs are much tighter and they're much closer, and it's just going to be, you're not going to be able to hit the insane average unless you're the Bandits of last year who just ran it up. But this year, even the Bandits, who were number 1 in the league, have been struggling to get, even near that 13 goals per game. So playoffs are tighter, but still 4 goals in the first game against the Bandits, 8 in the second game when you were up 8-4 and you didn't score any more the rest of the game. A little bit has to be on the offense. And I just think it's flat at times where they don't have a dynamic player. I know Mark Matthews is really good, and Schreiber
They don't have
play,
a Josh Byrne.
Right. And they don't have a Dane Smith. Like, Schreiber didn't play the whole season. They just don't have somebody that can, I don't know, take over the game. Like, they're just kind of boring, steady offense, which worked really, really well throughout the entire year because your defense was incredible and only allowed, 9 goals per game. So when your offense is scoring 10, 11, 12, that's perfectly fine because you're going to win 15 games and only lose 3. But when it comes to crunch time and you need some kind of big offensive games, they don't have the offense. They don't have a player to really turn to lead the team, lead the charge. To me, they just need some kind of big spark on offense. I don't know what it would be or who it would come from, but I think they need some extra piece again on offense after bringing in a 97-point Mark Matthews, who to me fell flat in the playoffs, which is kind of the issue. But outside of that, their defense is great. I don't think Nick Rose is going anywhere. That'll be great. They're going to be really good again, but outside of adding a big piece on offense, I do think it comes down to coaching, and it just has not been good enough in the crunch time when they need it to be the best. I mean, we see him because we see Toronto way, way, way too much over these last few years. But the difference to me, and I know some fans have pointed out, and every coach has a different philosophy, different way they coach, whatever. I like the passion that Johnny shows and the anger, and sometimes it's a little too much and he gets occasional penalty, but I'd rather take that. And even for the Sabres, Lindy Ruff, like, I need that. I don't need a Granado. And to me, that's what Sawyer is. Like, he's just always calm behind the bench.
Composed,
he's never really saying anything. He looks like he's, I don't know, barely even watching the game. He just no emotion whenever they go to him, whether it's a big play, small play, good, bad, there's just nothing. And to me, I like a coach closer to Johnny, who's out there yelling at his team, showing his team what to do, getting the team fired up, doing what he's got to do. And you see the difference when it comes to playoffs. Like, the Bandits have beaten Toronto 3 straight seasons and are 8-0 in the last how many years against them. And a lot of it could come down to coaching.
Yeah, I it's really going to come down to what Jamie Dowick ends up doing, because as the GM and the owner of the team, it really comes down to what he sees as best. And I know you're looking at these, they've lost 13 total games in the regular season the last 3 years, and you're trying to justify, hey, how do I fire this head coach?
Right.
You look at the playoffs, and they have come up short, and they have not gotten a win in the second round since the COVID season ended. So
not even like you said, just to game 3, even. Like,
right.
You're not getting any.
Yeah. It's coming up short, and you need to change something. And I think they're probably going to run it back one more time if they can get Corey Small and Mark Matthews back. I think they'll run it back again, and I think you got to try it one more time with a different head coach to see if you can get this group going. Because if not, then a bunch of these guys that are going to be UFAs the following year might not want to come back, or you might not be able to get them to come back. So I really think that is their best game plan, is to find a different head coach to try to bring back Mark Matthews and Corey Small and try to run it back one more time with just a different coaching philosophy for the playoff time. But those are the 3 teams that really had the highest expectations that just came up short. You can talk about, Georgia, who's an older team. You have a Panther City as well. But I think those are 2 teams that were less expected to do stuff this year. And those are in Halifax, San Diego, and Toronto were the teams that we kind of expected them to take that next step, and they just failed to. But let's move on to our next topic here. Season review of Albany versus Buffalo, and it has not gone Buffalo's way whatsoever. Game 1, first one of the season for Buffalo, second of San Diego's. They lost 17-13. And it was 2-2 after 1. Buffalo was down 10-6 after 2. They allowed 8 in the second. 7 of those 8 came in 9:17 of game action. Buffalo came back within 2, making it 12-10 after 3. But then they just traded 3 back and forth until Simmons scored the final 2 of the game. You had no Belter, no Dawson, no Farrell, no Bomberry. Wire's first game of his career. You had Solver, McCauley, and Spanger in the lineup for game 1. And then game 2 came the end of February. They lost 13-10. It was 4-4 after 1. Albany led 8-7 after 2. Albany led and scored the only goal in the third to make it 9-7, and then Albany scored 4 of the 7 in the fourth. You had no Brandon Robinson, no Dawson, you had no Farrell. Belter's first game in. You had Brown, Highfield, Spanger, and Clark all in. And then you also didn't have Matt Vince in net. You had Shanahan play that one. This is and we said it on last show, and we've said it multiple times now. These 2 teams are very different than what we have seen since February. And I think Albany has worked out their kinks since the late struggles in the season, and you got John Wagner back there. But Buffalo, you're adding Belter full-time. You're adding Bomberry and Vince, who did not play in game 2. You're adding Dawson, who didn't play in either. You're adding Farrell, who didn't play in either. You're adding Bomberry, who didn't play in either. Wire's first game of his career is in game 1. You don't have Brown, Highfield, and Clark stuck in the lineup. You don't have Spanger or Solver in there. You don't have McCulley anymore. Half this team is completely different than the first and second time you saw Albany's offense. So you can only take so much from games 1 and 2 because the team looks completely different.
Yeah, and I hate that because it sounds like an excuse already built into headed into this. And I know a few fans out there have said the same thing, like, oh, this team's completely different. And it's true, but it's also annoying because it just sounds like a built-in excuse of this team's very different than they were, but it's also really true. I mean, they were missing a lot of players. And not only that, the team's just completely flipped on defense. The offense has been there all season, as everybody knows, but the defense and Matt Vince have been wildly different than they were when they first played this team. And in game 1, I watched the Nick Weiss interview on with the Sabres, and he mentioned, they kind of mentioned a little bit about the series, and he even mentioned in game 1 that the Bandits came in with a lot of swagger, a lot of championship behind them, thought they were going up against a team that had only won 3 games all of last year, and they came out just way too cocky and just thought that the game was going to be given to them, that they were going to be able to roll over Albany like they did last year, and it wasn't going to be a big deal, and it was going to be an easy win, and they quickly realized it was not, and they ended up losing that game. But game 2, to me, was a lot of penalties. The Bandits ended up with 30 penalty minutes in that game compared to 16 for Albany, and Albany was 4 of 8 on the power play. That is not only bad to allow 4 power play goals, but also that is, that much more time that Albany has the offensive possessions that the Bandits do not have the offensive possession. So even these two games, I don't know, it's just so frustrating to have to keep saying that it's like it's completely different things. It just sounds like an excuse, but it's very, very true. I mean, even that second game, it's hard to take a lot away from because you were still missing a lot of players. And at the same time, the offense wasn't given a great opportunity because of the amount of penalties, but the amount of penalties might also kind of stay with them in the playoffs. And that is a big concern, but very different Bandits team than either of these games. But I mean, last year when the Bandits had such a good season, they also struggled against Albany in the game. So this team's just had a little bit of the Bandits number throughout the last couple seasons. So it is scary. And these first two games, though, just sadly don't tell you a lot about the upcoming series.
Yeah, we can look at all the numbers of the players real quick in these two games because this is one of the few teams that you actually played twice. And like you mentioned, Matt Vince did not play in game 2, so you can only take some of these numbers for the grain of salt. But I thought Shanahan played unbelievably. He's not the reason they lost that second game. But, Byrne, 5, 10, and 15 on 26 shots. That's another goaltender that seems to not have his number, but Byrne struggles to score against. We said that against Nick Rose, and Josh Byrne ended up only walking away with that series with 3 goals. Didn't end up mattering, but it was definitely
His
one that
were really impressive.
Yes, you definitely got to keep an eye on this one if Jameson has more of Josh Byrne's number than he actually knows. Maybe he has like 5 of the 7 digits. But the big one here is Dane Smith. 1 goal, 11 assists, 12 points, 14 shots. And let me scroll up to the first game because I don't believe he took very much. He had 3 shots on net in game 1. That is not enough for a guy like Dane Smith. And that was what we were saying earlier in the season and a lot of other people were saying the same thing. Where is the goal scoring from Dane Smith? It's just non-existent. And we saw in game 1, he took 3 shots. Like that's not enough. Where he also has 20 loose balls and 5 caused turnovers in these 2 games, 4 caused turnovers in the second game. But if Buffalo's going to be able to walk away with this one, Dane Smith and Josh Byrne have to be Dane Smith and Josh Byrne in these ones, pumping the goals and getting everybody involved. Kluch, 6, 4, and 10. Nanticoke's only got 3 goals on 15 shots in this one as well. You need to get him inside as well. And Frazier, 2, 2, and 4 on 13 shots. If you can get Swagger, Chase, Frazier in this game, I think you can walk out victorious. But you're looking at the numbers for Albany now. Kurtz, 6-goal game in game 2, 8, 4, and 12 total for 22 shots. Simmons, 6, 8, and 14, 28 shots. Marshall Paulus, 3, 4, and 7 on 5 shots. Longboat, 4, 7, and 11 on 13 shots. You had Ethan Walker, who's the quiet assassin, 3, 8, and 11 on 17 shots. Grennan, 1, 4, and 5, 9 shots. Firth, 1, 5, and 6 on 4 shots. This team has the pieces, and we've been saying it for a while, and we'll probably say it on Friday's show as well. You need to be able to shut down these rookies. And if the rookies get going, the chances of you walking out of this one back-to-back champions are very slim because the swagger just keeps pouring on when Kurtz and Simmons start flowing, and they put up shots 22 and 28 apiece. It's definitely a scary team to go against, and Albany has had their number the last 2 years going 3-1 against Buffalo.
I'm trying to do some math real quick. Give me one moment. I'm almost done, I think. 21, 68.
While you're doing that, Nardella as well. And Buffalo didn't have Connor Farrell, and I think this is a game where you saw versus Toronto, when Toronto pretty much shut out Buffalo. They went out and got Max Adler. This is a game where they pretty much shut them out in the second game. It was 25-2 in faceoff dot in game 2, and whether that ended up mattering is a debate topic that's still going on nonstop. I don't think it truly matters. I think what happens immediately off the faceoff matters more. But this is a matchup for Connor Farrell that really proves your worth in this lineup if you can shut down Joe Nardella and do what you did game 1 versus TD Erlin.
Gosh, I'm trying to do so much extra math that is probably irrelevant. So basically, I was looking at the shooting percentage because a lot of those numbers that you just mentioned are really bad for the shots on goal compared to the shots that they're scoring. So they had about a 30 shooting percentage for the top four guys there: Kurt, Simmons, Paulus, and
That's
Longboat.
really good.
And compared to, we'll say, Josh Byrne for his entire season, he had a 24% shooting percentage throughout the entire career, his season this year, and he had 53 goals and is one of the best in the entire game. So they were shooting at a ridiculous rate. I mean, and that's part of it, though, is that they are a team that loves to move. They love to get open looks. And I don't know if it's necessarily a team that's going to put up 60, 65 shots in a game, but it is a team that'll put up 40 really quality, good looking looks. I mean, for Paulus to score 3 shots on 5 goals, Longboat 4 on 13, and even Kurtz is almost at 50% shooting, which is just not good if you're the Bandits. So even the 30% between those top four players is ridiculous. That is a really, really high number for the NLL to be sitting at. So something the defense absolutely has to look at. I mean, even Kurtz and Simmons, are going to be really good, but Paulus and Longboat, just those additional, I mean, that's 7 goals between 2 players in 2 games on just 18 shots. I mean, it's those secondary scoring pieces that in a playoff series can absolutely kill you in that kind of situation. And then for the Bandits offense, Doug Jamieson in game 2 had an 82% save percentage, which is really good. But in game 1, the Bandits only had 45 shots on goal, and he was sitting at a 71% on the 13 goals let in. So kind of a flip between his first game and his second game against them. First game didn't really take a lot of shots, but let a lot of goals in. And the second game had a lot of shots, but didn't allow a lot in. So if you're trying to take a little bit more from that second game as far as the offense goes, they did end up getting 56 shots in that second game, but Jameson looked really, really good, and he's a player that's come on extremely strong this entire season after a bit of a down year with a bit of a down team last year, and this year I think he's done a good job. So it's going to be not the easiest job for the Bandits to offense to just kind of keep it rolling.
Yeah, the only other thing I have here, and we kind of did this numbers, and I think it was Lax Magazine put it out about the block shots for Buffalo and leading the league, and how the winning team had 6 of the 7 games they came out victorious with the block shots lead. But I dove into that more because we've been saying it for a while. Once Paul Dawson came out on this team, that defense philosophy kind of shifted, and I was wondering, hey, how much is that actually true? In the 13 games before Paul Dawson, and this includes the playoffs as well, 13 games before Paul Dawson came in, they had 74 block shots. That's 6.17 shots or block shots per game. Only 2 of those games, they had 10 or more block shots, and I think they were both right at 10. In the 9 games with Paul Dawson, 97 block shots. That's 10.78 per game, and 7 of those 9 games, they had 10 or more block shots. So it is true. Once Paul Dawson came in, this defense has shifted their philosophy in blocking these shots. And I think only one game, which was Panther City, really came back to haunt them because they were blocking so many shots and they were so gung-ho on it that a lot of times when they weren't coming up with those block shots, they were screening Mad Vince in the process. I think since that time, they went on that giant winning streak, and these block shots have been more quality block shots, and you've been doing it in the right positioning where you're not blocking the shot if you do not get a piece of it where Mad Vince can still see around you. So adding Paul Dawson to this lineup, just the one piece. You can exclude the Zach Belters, you can exclude the Bomberries, the Pharaohs, so on and so forth. I think just Paul Dawson alone, his veteran leadership back there and knowing what Mad Vince wants to see and what he is able to then do to this defense has definitely shifted what they've been able to do. And I think that's definitely going to be something that's a nice added change, excluding all the other pieces that are different against this Albany team that you haven't seen yet.
Yeah, Weiss in his interview, again, like we've seen with some of the players, really talked up Dawson in that addition and his veteran leadership, not only on the field, but off the field. But he said he gives the defense such a calming presence back there that he's always kind of relaxed. He's always talking to them. His communication's great, but just seeing how calm he is about all the situations. And like you mentioned, knows what Vince wants, can communicate with him really well, but communicates with the young guys and the stepping up of the block shots. He said it comes a lot from what Dawson's been able to bring. So we've been very honest about it. A player that we thought was a good depth addition has become a massive addition for this defense as a whole, not only as a veteran leader, but just everything that he's been able to bring to this team, which is he's completely outperforming how we expected he would be. And I know you mentioned a big thing was him staying out of the box, which I think he's done a really nice job of. But in general, I think I expected him to be a little bit more of a depth rotational piece, and he has been a main part of this defense and what he's been able to bring. And it's been a really, really impressive addition by Dietrich. And I think he deserves a lot more credit than he's getting for that addition, because I think every single player at some point now has mentioned it in a interview that Dawson was a massive addition to the team and just has been such a big upgrade for the defense.
So before we get into our ways that Buffalo can win this series, let's dive into our final sponsor, Mr. Sizzles.
Mr. Sizzles is at 346 Connecticut Street in Buffalo, New York, but they are opening 2 more locations pretty soon. They are currently open 7 days a week, 11 to 11, with a brunch menu on Saturday and Sunday from 11 to 3.
So their new menu is out. It is available, and a lot of people have been trying it, and they've been posting pictures nonstop on their social media sites, and they all look absolutely delicious. I haven't been able to make it down there to try the new menu yet, but it is on my to-do list as the weather is changing. And Phil, since we're recording earlier on this Sunday, I thought it would be a good idea to have a brunch pairing. And everybody loves brunch, and you mentioned it, 11 to 3. This is my brunch pairing for this evening. I'm going to start with the eggs and taters. It's French fries, smash burger, fried eggs, cheese sauce, chopped bacon, and scallions. And then I'm going to pair that with my cocktail of choice. My city smells like blank. Vodka, GM cereal milk, and rich simple. Phil, what did you think of my brunch pairing? I think I'm going to be very full and probably have to skip lunch after that.
I like it, and hopefully you don't get too many of those drinks, because they sound delicious, and I feel like it could go poorly if you have too many at one time pretty quickly. But it sounds really, really good, and I like the early recording brunch pairing that is currently still going on right now if we sprinted really quickly.
Yeah, I was going to say I have to help my sister move a couch, but that should be pretty quick, so maybe I can stop down there really quick. But if you are interested in this pairing or making a pairing of your own, you can check out their menu on their social media sites or at MrSizzles.com. Phil, our final segment here, we both picked 3 things that Bandits must do to beat Albany. Would you like to start off with your first one, or you want me to?
Yeah, I looked at your list, and they were all the 3 that I wanted, so I had to get pretty creative. Because you took the really good obvious ones, but
You're welcome.
they're necessary, and that's why they're obvious. But I guess
I'll go first then.
Okay, you can.
I'll go first then, since you got more creative. I think since these are obvious, I'll go first. My number 1: if you shut down Alex Simmons, you're gonna have a great chance to beat Albany because the offense flows through him. I still think that Ethan Walker is their quarterback back there, but if you're not allowing Alex Simmons to have those clear looks, to have his pinpoint accurate shot, and him just being able to, once he scores, he gets more and more confidence. If you're able to shut him down, allow him to score maybe 1 or 2 goals, but you got to keep that ball out of his stick and keep his shots on Mad Vince down. If you're able to shut down a Alex Simmons as best you can and have him have a 1-2-3 day, or do what you did to Mark Matthews and Tom Schreiber. If you're able to do that on defense, you're going to have the best opportunity to beat Albany and become back-to-back champions.
For my number 1, I'm going to go a little bit away from what you said earlier, even though I do still agree. I mean, Byrne and Smith have 8 goals and 3 goals in the 3 games. So Byrne took over the Georgia game, but outside of that, not a ton of goals, but they still have 18 and 16 points. So the offense is still running through them by far. But to me, with them struggling a little bit in the scoring goal department, it's going to take the secondary scoring again to continue to pick up the pieces. And Callie Buchanan with his 5 is number 2 on the team. Then you got 3, 2, Fraser with 5, Cloutier with 3, Robinson with 2. It's those secondary pieces, I think, for the offense that are really going to need to kind of shine in a series like this. And like you already mentioned, Smith only had 1 goal in the 2 games earlier in the year. Byrne had, 3 or 5 earlier in the year? I think 5 you mentioned. So Jameson might have both of their numbers a little bit. I think Smith needs to shoot a little bit more than he did earlier, but even if they are struggling a bit, I think it's going to be those secondary pieces that still need to make a really good job and kind of just take over a lot of the goal scoring, because Burns' assist is at 10 and Danes is at 13. So the offense is still funneling through them, even if they're not necessarily the main goal scorers. But I think the secondary scoring is still going to be big. And then in the second game against Toronto, we saw the transition goals kind of dry up compared to the first game. I think that's also going to be a big key for the offense, is having those very quick Ian McKay sprinting down, Nick Wee sprinting down, kind of transition goals to kind of just keep the game moving.
So my second one I kind of stole from you from the last show. I think it was a great point. So I was like, it's mine now. Quick switch offs, because Albany's forwards, they just cause havoc and they're so quick. They're an offense that Buffalo hasn't really seen a ton of this season. And this is the offense that I wish Buffalo would slowly more become. It's not like there's one player that the ball is always in their stick and they're just trying to take players one-on-one. And you see Buffalo do that a bit too much for my liking, and I can only critique them so much because they finish with the best goal scorers in the league. But I just wish they would move the ball around more, and that's kind of what Albany's offense is. It's they do not care who is the main goal scorer, and you see that in their celebrations after somebody scores. They really don't care as long as the ball's going in the back of the net. Defense has to get out on these shooters, and they have to be able to either switch off or get through those picks quick, because if you're not able to do that against Albany, you're going to see these goal scorers put up numbers, and they scored 30 total goals in the 2 games that they faced Buffalo. If they're able to average 15 goals a game versus this Buffalo team, I don't think you're walking out. If you're able to keep them at even 11 or 12 goals a game, I think Buffalo's offense can compete with that. I expect more from this Buffalo defense and Matt Vince than like the 10 or 11 average that I just mentioned. But if the defense is able to get out on those shooters and make their time on offense less fun than what we see it as, I think Buffalo can walk out victorious.
My second point is going to stick with the offense, and it's something that we've struggled with the entire season that we've been mentioning and kind of seeing, and something they struggled with a lot in game 2 against Toronto, and that is just the goal droughts. Against a team like Albany, they are an offense that can go on runs, they can get on runs, and they can really just kind of put a game away early if you do not continue to score and kind of fight it back. And this is a team that we've already mentioned earlier in the season that the Bandits tried to come back, and then Albany had a really good fourth to kind of squash it. So it's a team that if you let them get too far away, they're going to be able to be a little bit more difficult, in my opinion, than against a Toronto team that was shut out completely. And a lot of that does have to do with the defense and Vince, but I think that their offense is a little flatter than Albany's offense. And I think Albany's offense has the ability to, if they get on a big lead, to stop the Bandits from going on runs. So I think it's really key that the offense does not have these 15 to 20 minute goal droughts, because in that time period, if Albany finds a way to get 2 or 3 or 4 goals, I think it's going to be really hard to catch up to them. And we already saw it in the San Diego series that San Diego had 2 fourth quarter pushes that they tried to get back in the game, but it was too little too late because Albany had gotten so far ahead. And I think that's something Buffalo needs to really keep an eye on. Obviously, shutting down their offense is a big part of that, but also just trying to score consistently, at least 1 a quarter would be great. Having these shutout quarters is just not going to work against a team like this.
So my last one here, it's pretty obvious. I think it's one that we've mentioned all year long, but it comes up huge against Albany. Stay out of the box. Stay disciplined. I don't think Albany can beat them if you're staying out of the box. And game 1 this season, they gave them 6 power play opportunities, 2 for 6. Not terrible, but 6 opportunities. That is 6 opportunities that your offense can't get going, and they have to play a man down. Game 2 got worse. They gave them 8 chances. They were 4 for 8 on the power play. That's 6 power play goals on 14 opportunities. That's 14 opportunities that your offense is playing a man down. That can't be it. I don't know. And it happened with San Diego as well. And it happened with Halifax as well. I don't know what the heck Albany is saying to their opponents to get them so rattled and put themselves in the box and taking dumb penalties. Buffalo needs to be that team that has made 4 straight finals. They have to be that team that just won the championship last year. They have to be the smarter, more disciplined team in this matchup. They can't do what they did in games 1 and 2 versus Albany. If they do that, Albany has a great chance to shock the world and beat the defending champions and walk out. Even in a sweep, I could see if Buffalo doesn't stay disciplined. If Buffalo runs into the same things they did versus Toronto in game one, where they allowed 1 for 8 on the power play, and yes, you might say, hey, that's great odds, but you gave them 8 power play chances. Like it can't happen. If Buffalo's able to stay disciplined and be that smart team that we saw earlier in the year, where I think it was the Toronto game where we keep going back and forth, was this Toronto game where Toronto was trying to get them to fight and take those dumb penalties, and they were just laughing and walking away. If you get that type of Buffalo discipline, you're going to be able to beat Albany. I really believe that. But if you get into trouble and you allow those chances on the power play, and your defense gets tired, especially against an Albany team like this, where they just pass it around so much and your defense is moving around so much, if you can stay out of the box, you can win. If you go in the box, you're giving yourself a tough chance to repeat as champions.
It's also concerning that they bring it up after every single game and
Yep.
not much has changed. Like they know it's an issue, but you knew it was an issue going into a Toronto game where you allowed 8 penalties. And then the next game, you
Definition
still
of
allowed a
insanity.
lot of penalties. And they continue to say after every, oh, we need to be more disciplined every single game. Okay, well, just maybe try it. And I know some of the calls have been pretty iffy, and they're calling the playoffs a lot tighter than I would like to see. I like it
Agreed.
a little bit looser and just pocket the whistle, but they are calling it tight. And if that's what is going to continue to happen, the Bandits have to be very, very careful against Albany. I think, to me, from what I've seen, I think what Albany does is they do not fight back pretty much ever, it seems. And I think a lot of it just goes to being a very young, very fast team that these veteran teams think they can kind of pick on. And when the Albany player, I do think they dive a little bit here and there. I think they just do not fight back. So I don't think they're a very physical team. I mean, I think their defense could be, but when they're on offense, they don't really do a lot to be physical. They don't really give it back. And I think that's a lot of the problem, is that they just kind of, lay down and play dead, and the Bandits or San Diego or Halifax want them to, fight back, and they just don't. They just take it and accept the penalty and say, okay, we're on the power play. You got a stupid penalty. That's better for us than having to fight back and kind of give it back to you. And I think the Bandits game with Toronto is more the way the Bandits defense likes to play, where the Toronto offense, because it's such a heated rivalry, is going to give it back. They're going to be physical on both sides of the ball. And I think that's where the Bandits enjoy that a little bit more. And the Albany series, I could see Albany kind of taking, these cross checks that we've been keeping an eye on throughout the whole year and just falling over pretty easily. And if the ref's going to call it, they're going to keep doing it. And I think it's going to be really tough for the Bandits. But my final one is something you mentioned earlier in the episode, and it is the difference in block shots since Paul Dawson has come to the team, and something that we haven't seen this defense really be able to do against Albany because he wasn't here when they played them. So Priolo leads the team with 8. Dawson has 7. Bomberry has 4. Weiss has 4. Wires has 4. Martin has 3. McKay has 2. Belter has 1. Like, the block shots so far, they have 33 in 3 games. I think that is going to be a massive part of this, whether they're on the penalty kill, on, 5-on-5, even strength defense. I think the block shots need to keep coming, and I think it's going to be a big part of stopping this Albany offense. If you can get in their shooting lanes, if you can, throw a stick up there, throw your body out there, I think they're going to get flustered because, they aren't getting the same looks that they want to. And if the defense can also perform the same way as they did, I think it was in game 1 where Toronto had 35 shots that were off net because of the way the defense was in their face the entire game. If they can play that style of defense and get out there, put their body on the line, I think they are going to probably shock the Albany team a little bit. That's had it pretty easy as far as their offense goes. It's been flowing without too much of an issue so far in the playoffs and kind of throughout the year, other than that end of year kind of stumble they had.
So those are our 6 total ways that Buffalo can walk out of this finals as a champion. So Phil, is there anything else you would like to add to this Mother's Day episode before we shut it down? And our next show will be previewing this finals that have finally been arriving.
No, I think I am all set. Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers, including pet mothers. That is who are in our lives. We have a lot of pet families and moms of these pets. So happy Mother's Day to them as well.
Yeah, hopefully everybody had a wonderful Mother's Day, whether you're celebrating it with your mother or you are a mother yourself. So, thank you all for listening to another episode of the Buffalo Sports Collective. Thank you to Tap That Tap Room and Mr. Sizzles for sponsoring this show and this episode. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at Buffalo Sports Collective, and on X and Blue Sky at Buffalo Sports Co. Visit our website at buffalosportscollective.com. My article will be out on Thursday for the finals matchup. It's going to be a fun one to write. Hopefully it's just the last one. And then follow our channel wherever you listen to podcasts. Leave us a review on Apple and Spotify. We love those 5-star reviews. Absolutely love them. So until next time, bye-bye.